So I should start by saying that this is the last lecture. This is the very last lecture in this master level course on sustainable development and sustainability science. Next time, there will be a general discussion. I will see as many as possible from the Swedish Aral Sea Society to take part. And I would like to see everyone in Nukos to be present. I will try to arrange so everything will be bilingual, that is both English and Russian, because Russian is the possibility we have for translations. So everyone should understand everything that's being said. All students, all 12 students, should be prepared to say something about the course. You have 1 week to think about this now. And when it comes to small presentations and comments on small presentations, it will be this afternoon, but not next time. So this is the last occasion for small presentations. So with that said, you are all welcome to this lecture number 14, Personal Change and Transition of Societies. Transition of societies to become more sustainable, you know. Okay, then we'll start. We are 10 minutes late, so this is the situation. There is much we need to change to become more sustainable, you know. Just remind you of a few things. We have to be more efficient with resources. We have to use less resources. We have to be more efficient with energy, use less energy. We have to recycle everything. We have to use things together, share resources. We have to think about travels, and so on and so on and so on. So much needs to be changed to be sustainable. When it comes to how people change, how each person change, this is a process of individual change. There are many theories on individual change, especially from the business society. But it's very clear that individual behavior change is not a question of knowledge and rational choice. It rather depends on other things like social interactions, you know what others do, lifestyles, which lifestyle we have, norms and values, support from information that is tailored for a change, policies on a higher level, you know, state level and so on, technologies available, etc. So there's a number of parameters that influence our change. There is also very much resistance to change. The natural tendency of most individuals is to preserve what they have rather than trying something new, even if it's expected to be better. They want to stay with what they have. So the status quo, that is what we have, has a higher value. Change is uncertain and it requires an effort. Most people are in fact habitual. They conduct their lives as they always have. Well, if change does not happen, the consequence of not changing is postponed to the future. This is sometimes very serious. And economy, it has been investigated much, but it's even worse when it comes to the global crisis. For example, global warming and climate change. It's even more important that we, take care of change now and not in the future. The risk is a very important aspect here. Perception of risk, how we understand risk, is mostly very irrational and depends on other factors than carefully calculated data. Risk may be ignored, for example, when it comes to car driving and bad habits for health. especially when it comes to bad habits for health. Risk may also be exaggerated. For example, air travel is perceived as dangerous very many times, but in fact, driving the car to the airport is more dangerous than the air travel itself. The risk of climate change has been calculated by the IPCC, and it has been calculated for every single change. And as it is now, we have more than 50% risk of more than 2 degrees global warming. In fact, the most recent data is that even if we are very good at stopping emission of carbon dioxide, there will be 2.1 degrees global warming. This risk is very seldom well understood. And threat, how do we react to threat? For example, when a patient has survived from a heart attack, he or she may be told by doctors that he or she have to change behavior to avoid an almost certain imminent death. So if you go on to live as you always did, for example, overeating or whatever, not taking care of your health, you will almost certainly die by a heart attack a little later. When people heard this, there are two kinds of reactions. One is a category of people who learn very much about heart illness and so on, and they change behavior. Another group, they are unwilling to change, and they disregarded and played down the danger and did not change. These patients are today offered a program to learn a new behavior. A similar split can be seen for climate change. Some face the danger, learn about it and change, but many more rather avoid the topic and play down the risk. They don't react very well to the threat. How can we see a behavior change? This is especially research when it comes to health, because very many times people need to change their habits to improve their health. Information that a certain behavior like smoking or drinking, etc., is damaging does not automatically lead to change. In fact, information itself has very little effect. Regulation, that is, you don't allow a certain thing or so, it's also an important incentive, but it does not lead itself to change so efficiently. For example, obligatory safety belts in cars was introduced some years back, and it did not have much of an immediate effect. It took a long time before people understood it for their best safety, and they started to use safety belts, not because it was legally required, but because it was good for their health. So change is more readily accepted if it is voluntary. That is, you see it's good for you to change, and then when this is understood like that, it will also be more long-lasting. For example, if you say stop smoking, otherwise you will die from cancer or you will be shorter lived, in fact, this has been extremely well researched, but just the information is not enough itself. There are other ways to do this. For example, the environmental consequences of the threat is typically very far away, both in time and space. For example, when climate change is in the future, and then it's difficult to make people change. Information may lead to increased awareness, and this may come later as a behavior change. It's a new behavior rather than the information and knowledge that leads to to a change. This is an interesting, triangle: awareness, education, and action. Now, very many people think that we start with education, especially in schools and at universities. We think we start with education. It leads to awareness of something, and then you change action. But in fact, it's rather the other way around. You start with action. From action, you go to awareness. You become aware of some problem, and then when you're aware of it, you learn about it. So education comes the third rather than the first. This is something we need to reflect upon a little more. We have to start with practical steps, and then come awareness, and then we start to learn about something. What is very important when it comes to change are the so-called antecedents. What we need to do to have a change. So the first is very typically practical situation. For example, the concrete situation before the change. The practical information conditions should be such that a new behavior is easily accessible. That is, it's more easy to stop smoking if there are no cigarettes around. So if you want to stop smoking, start by taking away all cigarettes. Then, of course, it should be difficult to carry out the bad behavior, and it should be easy to make the good behavior. So this is an important step here. For example, this is from a British study about waste management, and it turned out that it's very much more likely that people put their waste where they belong if it's easily done. That is, if you have these containers along the road where you live, so it doesn't make any big effort to put the waste where it belongs. Well, the consequences of a change in behavior are also important. Of course, a change in behavior is meant to lead to a better life somehow, but these consequences are often very far in time, as I mentioned, far in time and perhaps also space. But because of that, we need to make something immediate, artificial consequences. And these artificial consequences are very often economic. That is, we arrange the situation such that it is less expensive to do the environmentally bad behavior, and it's less expensive to do the environmentally good behavior and more expensive to do the environmentally bad behavior. For example, if you have a cost on energy consumption, or there is a cost for not sorting waste properly, then people are changing. And then half a year later, perhaps you take away these costs, and then they still continue with the new behavior. It has been proven in several studies. So economic incentives doesn't need to be there forever. It could be only for a period to make the behavior change. This interaction with others is very important. It's called proper social norms. So as I mentioned, it should be easy to carry out good behavior, for example, recycling. But it's also important that you see others do it. For example, if your neighbors all put their waste where it belongs, it's easier for you to do the same. Then it's being understood as the social norm. It's simply what everyone does, so you should also do it. Proper social norms is very important. So, some summary about what we know about how an individual change behavior. First, the practical situation. The new behavior is easy to carry out. then the consequences, it should be economically better to use the new behavior rather than the old. This can be done by charges, taxes, or subsidies. Enough members of the society should adopt the new behavior so it becomes a social norm. And when we come to that stage, we have a new awareness in society about changing behavior, and people start to learn about it. This has happened, for example, when it comes to climate change, at least in Sweden. Okay, so much about individual change. Now we come to social change and transition of societies. So change of civilizations and societies, it's something that has been going on throughout history. For example, we went to an agricultural society from an agricultural society to an industrial society, and from an industrial society to a service society. That is, fewer and fewer people work in agriculture, and then fewer and fewer people work in industry, and more into service. And this development, of course, is different in different countries. In Sweden today, about 2% work in agriculture, and a few percent more in industry, and about 70% in service society. I know it's different. In Uzbekistan, you have very many more percent in agriculture. This development has been caused by technological and organizational developments. Large-scale production, new machinery, new organization of work, and so on. But all these changes have been characterized by a steadily increased use of resources. That's what we talked about in the beginning of this course. There is also a change in social order. It has been studied quite much by political scientists. This so-called modernization has been the development from authoritarian societies to democratic government. I should perhaps say here that democracy is a rather young form of government. It's perhaps 100 years old, and it's not implemented in all societies, as you are very aware of. We go from feudalism, where very few own enormously much, to capitalism and the market economy, where the market can decide very much more. We go from a development of the welfare society, that is, the state is more responsible for the welfare than the family. We also go to a situation where human rights are more and more accepted. And we go also from a society where the environment was downplayed to a society where environmental protection is very important. This has happened since about 1960 or so. And we go to a situation where we have more globalization, especially using information technologies, which we do now. This is all part of modernization. And of course, different societies have been more or less into this process of modernization. So of course, I'm aware of it's very different in your country than in my country. These changes can take place in two different ways. It could be sudden, a revolution, or it could be, gradual, an evolution. The political changes that is connected to this is decolonization. Decolonization is typical for the 1960s in particular. Very many countries became independent. In your case, of course, it has to do with the dissolution of Soviet Union. So this is more into 1990s. We have more global cooperation and trade. We have less concern with military power, at least in some countries now. I'm afraid that it's increasing a little. and we have economic growth as a primary political goal rather than military power. 100 years ago, it was military power that was the overwhelming goal for a state. The end of the Cold War in 1991 or something, 1989 to 91, everyone in Eastern and Central Europe was positive to the changes. But after some time, some people missed the old system. So we know it takes a generation or so to adapt to a new social order. This is the fall of Berlin Wall, of course. It's 89, November 89. So what we see, what has been called by Alvin Toffler already in the 1970s, a future shock. A future shock is too much change in a short period of time. So people get stressed, they feel alienated, they don't know whom they are simply. And this may result in an anger. Person is transferred into a new culture, sort of. And it's also connected to migration very often. Stress and disorientation. This is future shock. So things like modernization need to take some time. Well, how is this taking place then if you look at society as a whole? Well, if you have a new idea, it's when about 5% of the society accept a new idea, it becomes embedded, that it is present in society. If 20% adopt the new idea, it's unstoppable, That's where we need to come when it comes to sustainable development, a new idea for some people. But it requires that about 50%, half of the population, are aware of the new idea, in order to reach the 50% who will adopt it. So this is how many in a society needs to accept the idea to make it, develop, like sustainable development. Innovations, now here it's much from, economic theory, but innovations in a society happens in stages, and it's knowledge, persuasion, decision, implementation, and confirmation. So all these elements are needed to influence the spread of a new idea in society. And the actors in this change are called innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. So we will see in a process of diffusion of a new idea in society, looks like this. So in the beginning, very beginning, you have innovators that really introduce the new idea. It's only a few percent of society. Early adopters, those who early on are, willing to adopt the new idea, think it's a good idea. So then we are up, to 15% with those two groups. Then the first part of the majority is starting to change. The early majority, 34% in this, study. So, and then, of course, after that, we have the late majority, another third of the population. And then finally, that are the laggards, those who resist as much as they can. And this is based on studies from, economists. How to make a new product or a new idea, a new behavior introduced and accepted in the society. It takes time, but all these, various groups are making the change finally. So here you see what kind of groups we are confronted with when it comes to behavior change. Reactionaries, they are very skeptical to all kinds of changes. Reactionaries, you probably have seen them. Laggards, they are slow to change. They really do not want to get involved, but in the very end, they get involved. The mainstreamers, these are the majority. It's the early majority and the late majority. These are the mainstreamers. And then we have the change agents. Those are understand what it is and try to implement the change. Transformers are often authorities, that is, people in political position who really can implement the change. And innovators, they are this kind of people are more concerned about their own situation. That might be helpful, but not always. So you see here, change agents is really a key group in the change. They are talking about the new. They are they're trying to persuade people to change, and they are explaining what it's all about. So you should all become change agents when it comes to sustainable development. Actors in social change then are social movements. If you have, for example, if you want to improve biking in your society, you could form a group who wants to support biking. That is a social movement. That is also those with vested interest. And they are protesting because they will probably suffer in the long run when the change is coming. For example, those selling cars will protest. They think people should drive cars instead of driving bikes, so they will protest. So there are those who support the change and those who protest against the change. So transition to a sustainable society, you have all these different things that we need to go through, these 4 steps. So we have to start to think about our limits to growth, our resource flow, to see that we can cope with the resources we have, and we have to think about something else than economic growth as the overarching goal. The very famous economist Nicholas Stern in England, he said that it's more reasonable to focus on energy and demography than growth. Growth is not a good goal. We should look at reasonable energy management, and what about people? We can't be as many people. And then what we see here, the word is postponing change. They are perceived as costly and pleasant and less pleasant. But even if some may protest, they are unavoidable in the longer terms. In this way, the transition to a more sustainable society is similar to the economic crisis. We try to take loans to keep the lifestyle unchanged, but we can't go on with that forever. Consequences are more serious as the change is postponed. We should not postpone the change. So there is a lot of difficulties in the transition to a sustainable society. Okay, this was the first half hour. Now there will be, as usual, 20 minutes break. And then after 20 minutes, I would like you to comment on these things. When did you make a major change in your life? What did you change? So try to identify each of you such a change. And why did you change? Was it difficult to do it? And then identify the change in your society, which led to increased sustainability. Or perhaps the future one, which will lead to increased sustainability. So think about these questions during the break. So I have two pieces left. The third one here, after the change of personal behavior to society, and now is managing change. How could we manage change? And it's something we had talked about before as well. For example, in connection with urbanizations, how to manage that. And I will repeat some of it, in fact. So conditions for an organization in change, if we want to change an organization like a business or a city or even a country, there is need for a strong support from the leadership. You need a strong support from the top of the organization. You need to think about institutional learning. That is, the whole institution, for example, the whole university, if it's a university, need to know what it's about and learn about the basics. And then we need to have an integrated work from all sectors. So in integration, institutional learning, and support, important conditions for successful change of an organization. And there are management systems for this. This I think you saw before because it comes from urban development. So you have, plan, do, check, act. It's a so-called Deming circle. It's very basic when it comes to change. You plan the change, you do the change, you check, and then you act on what you found out, and so on. So that's, if you want to change an organization, that's very basic. And then you need to look at all the aspects. Now, when it comes to the triple bottom line, I think it should be, expanded. So we have this compass instead: nature, economy, society, and well-being. For you need to look at all these four aspects of an organization, a city, or, for example, a university, or whatever needs to be changed. And then you need indicators you can follow the change. And you have seen this before. These are indicators when it comes to air, greenhouse gases. And you can see several cities in the world, how they have been successfully changing things. And of course, you need values for several years to see the change. So you can have this in a spider diagram. You have different parameters you have measured. When it comes to urban management, we did, identify the number of resources that should be managed. You may remember material resources, for example, energy, water, and so on. Urban space resources, that is the area. Human resources, the inhabitants in the municipality in this case. The societal resources, the city administration, the associations in the city, and so on. And the economic resources. And of course, this could also be translated into an organization like a university. It has material resources, or it has spaces where the buildings are and so on. Human resources, or the students and teachers, and society, that is the administration and so on, and then economy, of course. These resources are not exchangeable and they are all limited. So sustainable development is defined as proper management of limited resources. That's how you need to think if you want to change an organization. There are also very much detailed ideas about how to carry out this. And this comes from the so-called ISIS method of Alan Atkinson. You can find it on the internet, of course. These are the 9 critical steps for implementing a sustainable development in organization. It has been used very much by companies, but also other units like, for example, cities. So understand system, understand sustainability, understand there is a difference between development and growth. You need information. You need how the dynamics of change. You have to identify best practice. You have to see what strategy is available to make change happen. And then you have to implement them. And then again, you have to monitor and go back to step 1. This is on and on. And this is also used in workshops where the participants train changes. And this is called pyramid workshops. And there have been thousands of pyramid workshops carried out around the world. Some of them in Sweden and within the Baltic University, others in Asia, in fact, others in the United States and so on. So it's very general way to understand how to change an organization. This is one such workshop where Alan Atkinson is the one who is explaining things. You see his two hands to the right. He's explaining how to do this. And it's the workshops, everyone is active all the time to carry out these 9 steps. And as you do it, you build a pyramid for the 5 parts of the change. And this is when the pyramid is ready, you put on the top of the pyramid, and that is the implementation of the change. And here you see everyone who took part in the workshop, they are very happily announcing that they reached the top of the pyramid. There is another organization that has also been creating methods for introducing a change. It's called the Natural Step Foundation. The Natural Step Foundation is based on the so-called systems conditions for sustainable development, and they have been developed at the University of Technology in Sweden, Chalmers University of Technology. And this Natural Step Foundations process have been used in very many companies, but also cities, in fact. They work on backcasting, that is, they identify what they want to achieve, and then they go backwards in time to the present and see what are the different stages they need to reach the goal. So this is another one. And this one, the so-called Scott Geller model, he has identified 3 factors very important for a change, for a person who wants to take part. And he has called the model of actively caring. So the person who wants to make a change have to think in terms of self-esteem. I am valuable. You should all think that I am valuable. Also empowerment and optimism. You should think I can make a difference. And then thirdly, belonging and ownership. You should think I belong to a group. You should identify your group and you work together. So with these conditions, an individual may change his or her life to become more sustainable. And they can also perhaps become a change agent, as we talked about before the break. and help others to become more involved. So think about this, it's important. Okay, I will end this lecture and all my lectures with few comments on education for sustainable development, ESD. And that is because you will all become teachers in some way or another. You will all become teachers. You will teach your fellow students. You might teach younger students. Some of you might end up in school, I don't know. And you should also perhaps influence your surrounding, your family, or whatever. And of course, education, especially at the university and in school, they think it's the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. It's a word from Nelson Mandela in South Africa, who very successfully, after years and years of opposition, finally were able to introduce change in South Africa, to overcome the apartheid system. It's a much respected leader in our world. And here you see the young generation, but of course it's also true for students at the university level. So when you are a 21st century teacher, what competencies do you need? What competencies should you develop after this course? Well, there are 8 key competencies for sustainable development. You need to think in terms of systems. You need to see that sustainable development is not mono-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional. We have economy, we have natural resources, we have and so on. We have to think about the future, anticipatory competence. That is, we need to know what will happen in the future if we do in one way or the other day. We need to think about values, what is important in life. For example, our future inhabitants of our planet. And we have to think about strategy, how to carry out changes to have a better future. We also need collaboration competence. You need to be part of a group. You also need critical thinking. That is why I have, opponents or discussants in all the small presentations, because the discussant should be good at critical thinking. You also need the personal competence, as I mentioned, you need to think, I am valuable, I can make a difference. And then we come to something very difficult, integrated problem solving. How to take care of many problems together as one, bundle of problems that need to be addressed together. What is necessary to know for a 21st century teacher? What is necessary to know? What is the relevant content of education? Well, you need to know about the boundaries, the planetary boundaries. And you have to think that there is the biosphere, there are the ecosystems, there is the biocapacity, the tipping points, the resilience, and so on. So these are defining the planetary boundaries we have to stay within. And they provide the ecosystems, provide the ecosystem services that we need in human society. But in society, then we have to think about the commons, the fair trade, the eco footprints, the social justice, and the green economy, and so on. And they together lead to strong sustainability, the social and economic development within planetary boundaries, create a decent and healthy life built upon fairness and social justice. This is a good picture to think about, what we need to know. Planetary boundaries ecosystem services and a good society. You know, it's like the donut economy, if you wish. You need to provide the social conditions for a good life, but within planetary boundaries. Of course, all of this is explained in detail in the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. How should we teach about these issues? This is difficult. You know, we can't do it the same way as we did before. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. It's Albert Einstein who said this. I'm not quite sure it is, but anyhow, people say it's him who did it. But regardless, it's very true. We have to think new to be able to reach sustainable development, because the unsustainable world we live in today cannot be overcome by more of the same. It has to be something new, not more of the same, something new. You know, if you look at your studies, we need to look at innovative problem solvers, investigative explorers, creative communicators, versatile readers, critical thinkers, resourceful learners. This is the students. You have to be all this, and you have to create others to do it. And you see here that it's not about lecturing anywhere. Lectures doesn't take you very far. You have to do projects, work with projects, set up groups or do problem solving, or learn to collaborate communication, and have to be very good, which you are already digital, use digital techniques. And there is much we need to change. Just a reminder in the very end here now. Transport, what could you do? Bike or walk? Use public transport, use electric bike, etc., etc. Use biogas, hybrid or electric cars, and so on. This is a whole bunch of things that need to change. Food, also for very many people, a lot of change is needed. For example, be careful with food waste, cook the residues. Seasonal food, of course, is very, very good in Uzbekistan. Seasonal food, we have such beautiful fruits and so on. Locally produced food, it should not be difficult in your case. It's more difficult here. And living. Use ecological electricity when you can. Insulate the house, you need less electricity. Turn off, computers or TV sets or whatever when they are not used. Use LED lamps, so use less electricity, and so on, and so on, and so on. There is much to do. So think about this. We are not passengers on planet Earth. We are the crew. We are running the planet. You and me, we are running the planet. So that is the end of my lecturing. Thank you for your attention during all these 14 lectures in sustainable development and sustainability science. And all lecture materials is available on the homepage, this homepage. Go there and visit. And also the lectures have been recorded, as this lecture is, so you can go back there and listen to it again if you wish. And you should think about this, because in the end there will be an examination, an exam for this course. So thank you very much.